Hey guys, it's crazy how the evolution of all of our like mediums, like all of our marketing mediums, has gone. Right now, stay tuned or listen up for New York City, Mad Men, and the history of marketing.
All right, hey guys, Saman and Dress here. We're at a little bit of a different location.
Yeah.
We're in Jersey City. You can see New York, the skyline behind us. And today we're going to be talking about just the history of marketing slash advertising agencies and how they changed throughout the years. So first things first, we're drinking some Maker's Mark. So we're gonna pour one.
We actually get to do this in person today.
Yeah, it's the first one we're doing in person.
This is the first one in person.
Yeah. Don't worry, guys. We'll go backstage. So we want to make sure that everybody knows we're being safe.
Might as well celebrate.
Yeah.
From the top of this building, we're 39 stories high and epic view. So
yeah, you can't beat that view.
Yeah.
So one of the things that a lot of people that are in marketing and advertising, they always joke about the Madman days. And we want to start a little bit before that. We want to start around the 50s and start talking about, marketing back then, advertising back then. And we're going to kind of go all the way through the decades to where we are now, where we think advertising in marketing is going to be going, especially when it comes to agencies. So do you want to start sharing?
Cheers, man.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Let's
do it in person. Cheers to being in person.
Yeah. Hopefully getting back to normal soon.
Yeah. It's starting to open up, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, man, and you probably have to give me a little bit more because I am maybe one of the only branders and marketers out there that has actually not really paid attention and watched all of Mad Men. But like, first thing that I think about is, what was people doing back in the day, like maybe even like earlier than 1950s. It could be like 1940s as well. I mean, this is probably the biggest medium at that time, but it was radio.
Mm-hmm.
And just because we're in New York, or actually we're in Jersey, so I'm not going to say we're in New York. We're going to not mess around with that, but we get a good view of New York.
Mm-hmm.
I think about that one story that somehow stuck in my head. Maybe it's because of War of the Worlds, the Tom Cruise movie, which wasn't that great, but whatever. But the one thing that I recall was this like H.G. Wells talking through, and like first time this was ever played on the radio here in New York, and people were like freaking out about literally the war of worlds and like aliens coming down.
Mm-hmm.
So the power of radio was storytelling back then. That really was it. And that's probably the first medium from a digital, even though it's analog in a way, but from a different medium than just newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
In general. So that's kind of an interesting way to, start this like crazy evolution that we've been having. I mean, it's something that people think about.
And I think one of what you just brought up about storytelling,
Yep.
It's a really good point that I feel like radio was one of the first ones to really do that. And that's why they were so successful when it came to, marketing on the radio. Because at the end of the day, the most successful advertising is always storytelling.
Yeah.
You want to get that human emotion.
Yeah, for sure. And it's going full circle. I mean, I'm going to go like, from back then to now, but like think about podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And most people are monetizing podcasts, even though I just heard that Apple is now doing paid subscribers to podcasts, which is huge. It's different. But most people actually sponsor their episode.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one day we'll be sponsored by someone. Maybe Maker's Mark, who knows? But most YouTube shows and podcasts are bringing up some type of, product that is sponsoring them, and then they give a referral code or whatever it may be. But radio was the first to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, these things were like brought to you by X. I'm not even sure what.
Mm-hmm.
I'll think about that for a second. baking soda. I'm not sure. Arm and Hammer.
Yeah.
It might be one of them. Who knows?
That probably was, yeah. Yeah, no, I actually remember hearing that when I was very, very little. Still hearing that in the radio.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. I actually completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
And it's the same as podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, it's podcasts, and I mean, even YouTube is doing it a little bit like that too.
Mm-hmm.
So that medium of radio is probably what changed so much in terms of like how marketing and businesses look at it. And then I think you brought up something earlier, Andres, that now actually doesn't think of Mad Men for me. It actually brings up 2.5 Men, which I don't really want to bring up too often for Charlie Sheen's purposes, but you know, the jingles, right?
Yeah.
Like that was like a mnemonic device that allows us to all remember that particular brand that, you know, we want to talk about.
Yeah, and you know, I'm sure all of us and everybody watching, we have at least one or two jingles stuck in our head.
Yeah.
From years and years ago that you're never gonna forget, and you forget that it's there, but you hear it and it comes right back. And yeah, you're right, because I remember, you know, like in the part of Mad Men, they're talking about, you know, Don Draper gets really mad, like, why does everybody want a jingle now? Whatever happened to print? And it's just the changes that happen. You
Yeah.
know?
It was just something that people could remember when they went out. They weren't shopping from home then.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when they went out, they remember those jingles well. So I guess that was the first impression after the eyeball just of a, you know, looking at a really cool print ad or even a billboard.
Mm-hmm.
This would be the first like cookie, if you will, would be a jingle.
I like it.
Yeah. It's like an earworm that just hits you,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, I wonder why jingles are not still relevant.
I feel like a lot of businesses are still using them. They still kind of work.
True. Yeah, I mean they tie it in with their phone number fairly often.
But even, you know, websites and email addresses, I can't like think of any off the top of my head.
I
but
can't either. Yeah.
I feel like they do that.
So jingles are not completely gone. So that's good. All right. So yeah, I mean, and that brings up like, I mean, I guess it just again shows how like marketing and sales really do play with each other a little bit, right? So like, you know, if jingles were used as a device to get us to come out to a store on Main Street, because, you know, there really wasn't even malls then. It helped from a perspective of, you know, just whatever it may be that you're looking to get, like, or if you're just going to get your groceries or your cigarettes from back then, because, you know, it is anything to do with Mad Men, and us marketers used to smoke it quite a bit. That, you know, it just did help when you're just roaming those, you know, Main Street aisles or the general store aisles or whatever. So from that particular perspective, how do you correlate what's going on like after that, right? Like, and I'm going to use like Mad Men's like chronological history.
Mhm.
What kind of came after kind of the whole jingle element, right? After that particular piece.
It was all TV after that.
Yeah.
You know, that's when TVs really hit hard, and that's where people wanted to be.
Right.
And it makes me think of, you know, human behavior and just like kids watching TV, and, you know, the boomers being the generation where parents would be like, go watch TV,
Yep.
sort of thing.
Morning cartoons, all that
Right.
kind of good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, it was like really like the evening hours that everyone was actually hooked in front. I mean, TV dinners was a big thing. People actually back then, I don't really know, and you and I wouldn't know about it, but like would actually sit in front of the TV with a TV dinner
Mm-hmm.
and rather eat that than a gourmet meal.
Mm-hmm.
At least the typical, you know, middle class American, I would say, just so they can get that TV time. So our whole attention was on that.
And I think that was the start of, you know, the decline of the attention span
That's
around
true.
the world.
Yeah.
You know, when you have that much stimulation, you start losing focus on other things. You can't keep your focus for that long, which, you know, made it harder for us marketers.
Right. Yeah, we have less time to make some sort of impression.
Mm-hmm.
in general. So, you know, altogether, I guess even all the way through TV and now how shopping has changed too, right? Like it's not as much Main Street. Main Street was on the decline at that point, or starting to become on a decline. And then the malls came in, and, you know, the TV ads were actually these big box retailers, and you know, you get them into the mall, they're staying there for a while. I mean,
Right. Macy's,
That's where
JCPenney, all of those guys. Yeah.
yeah, so the mall rats really becomes the key, right? Like, shoot, you just get into the mall and you got your attention, and that's like literally the best cross sell and upsell that you can think of back then. It was really just shopping at the mall.
And you might know this, you know, better than I do. You know, now we use cookies, we use all kinds of stuff to keep track of who's buying what. What did they do back then to kind of keep track of their stats? Were they able to? Was it just kind of?
I mean, it was really all foot traffic. It's funny because I still notice sometimes, especially at like, you know, we're not in Maryland right now, but like if you're at Montgomery Mall and you go look at like as you leave Macy's or Bloomingdale's there, and you look at the wall, like right where the mall entrance of, you know, of that big box is, right? Like the internal entrance of the, you know, from the store into the mall, there's a little counter. It is still there. I actually noticed it just from like where the Macy's is, where like usually we leave, it was like the Cologne and that particular area. And I noticed it there because I think my son was just going around the Cologne perfume, you know, service counters and taking each like little like sample. So I remember him doing this and looking at that little counter that was still like analog, right? Like it was like a, you know, like the little clicker that was tracking people. So I think that was the case. And actually, as crazy as it is, they might not be actually doing this anymore. Like they're probably not actually always running, but the devices from the malls back then are still there. At least at our mall.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That's how they keep track.
Yeah. There's literally a clicker that would go by, and I'm guessing back then, because, you know, the tech wasn't as strong, like it was literally someone at the front door doing that, right? Like doing a click every time, because it wasn't as big of an entrance.
Right.
There was more controlled ways to get in. So I think that was really the case. I mean, that's the only stat that you can really do into a store. I think really, you know, this might be an issue for like newspaper and billboards and back then all of these different items before the internet kind of came into play. But there isn't really any way to kind of track an impression other than asking, where did you hear about us?
Right.
So that's the other way, was literally getting that kind of actual feedback from people. And again, I'm speculating here, but those two sound the most logical because there was no tech. So referrals and, you know, literally the communication between a sales like team or like the salesperson or, you know, whoever, the cashier at that store with the customer, like we actually did speak more with other people, which we don't do anymore either. And yeah, like they kept tabs, or they at least would try to, I would say, recall what people would say if they heard it on the radio or not. And, you know, I guess it was just power of how many times did someone actually say, I heard it on the radio or I saw an ad on the newspaper, to get people in then, which would cause people to go buy more of that particular medium or ad type. Yeah. So the agency world back then was, let's think about roles, right? So what are the big roles from the show? Like,
so you have pretty much like creative, the people that buy the ad time, and then the account executives. So like the account people that would manage the accounts.
gotcha.
Basically deal with the client. And, you know, I feel like those roles have really kind of merged in, you know, the last few decades. I feel like before everybody was very good at just one thing.
Yeah.
And I think with the years, for better or worse, you know, more people are getting better at more things.
Right. We're all becoming ninjas. So we're all wearing multiple hats now, almost to the point where, there isn't really a good title. Like I actually thought about this today. I was like, what is a good title that encompasses multiple things? And it sucks because you shouldn't be encompassing multiple things. You should be good at one thing.
And you don't know what to tell the client at the end of the day.
Right.
So, I'm a content director, but you're also handling my account, and then you're also buying the ads. Like, what's going on?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I guess back in the day was just way better. Like having an account executive, a guy in the suit that's just all out there making deals happen. I kind of miss that.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously the pandemic, obviously messed that up even more. So no one's even talking or meeting people in person in general. So there's not that networking as there used to be. But yeah, let them take care of keeping that client happy. So the work can actually get done during the day.
Yeah.
And now like we're all just running out of time in the day because of this. So that's an interesting little component. The creative director is still out there. I think a lot of people, a lot of clients, let's just call them, the client side of things, unless they're like a lifestyle company, now at least, most of them are not realizing the creative director is really like a brand director, right? Like every component, it could be like visual, copy. And I'm guessing back in the day, like especially even in Mad Men, there probably were copywriters that were even writing the jingles.
They had the PR department, the copywriters, and then the director that handled everything.
So that's an interesting little piece, and the editor had a lot of say, just like at a newspaper would. But copy and branding were kind of synonymous in general, because the visual and the copy kind of all work together in the right way, and that should still be the case now, right? Like it really means that like whoever is managing a portfolio or a brand should be looking at both the visual and the copy, the text, right, that goes along with it. And that should not have to do with an account executive. Let the guys that know what they're doing on the creative side or the branding side just run with that and not have to explain everything to the client. The account executive could sugarcoat it or do however they want to do it. Most of them do. Most of them sugarcoat. So to keep that relationship however they want it, so they can keep buying. So those are all interesting little components here, because those two pieces at least have stayed around, but they're all just wearing multiple more hats.
Yeah, and I think that's not only in marketing. I feel like that's almost every business now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the world is going.
That's for sure. I guess the world's also going towards anything that is less or more medial, I guess, right? Like it's becoming AI oriented. So, if we're going to this whole Mad Men world, I mean, it's crazy. Like back then, before it started going into radio or like into TV spots, the print and the billboards were doing well. It started dropping. Now, because they're able to track them in different ways, I've actually seen some billboards that even have the QR or some way to get people right away to whatever landing page you would want. But from my understanding, especially on the billboard side and a little bit of the direct mail and print, maybe less on the print, but direct mail are definitely having a resurgence. So those two pieces are less, I guess, media driven as they used to be, right? They're not newspaper driven, so you have to go buy these crazy ads with your local or national newspaper. But there is still a more blend of copy and visuals coming into play that, actually is, again, having this like resurgence in the right way. Like, I mean, I wouldn't have expected it this soon for that kind of thing to happen. And I think the pandemic must have helped because people are at home. But those two came back into play.
And I think it's also so especially with direct mail, I think it's also people are in front of the computer so much that now mail actually does kind of matter because you can throw a bunch of emails at them, a bunch of ads, but they see those, maybe 100 times a day.
Right.
So it's the thing that nobody else is doing.
Yeah.
That billboards, I'm really not a fan of billboards. That's one of my least favorite forms of advertising. I never knew how expensive they were.
They are extremely expensive. They have gotten cheaper, so that's great. We are still kind of coming out of a pandemic, so there wasn't as much movement. So that's obviously playing on the costs, right? Like, I mean, if no one's traveling, then billboards are not going to be useful because no one's going to see it. And it's all eyeballs, it's all impressions. So, you got to look at it as who does the most billboards right now, and they're definitely the national brands. I mean, the most memorable, I'd say, billboard these days to me is actually Chick-fil-A, and I keep thinking of the cow writing something about eating more chicken.
Yeah.
All kind of all over the place. So like, that's one. So I think again, it's like a national brands touching it more than the local, which does give an opportunity to a smaller business that if billboards are cheaper, especially if you have a retail space still. I mean, even if you don't, and you just want to get a whole bunch of local traffic to your website, it might not be a bad thing to do if the cost is not that ridiculous, right? Like you're playing with the big guys in terms of the national brands, and they don't resonate as much with people. I mean, they're really, for them, it's really just true branding. It's just, next time you see it, you probably remember and stop if you're traveling.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you brought up the national brands because to me, billboards are always fireworks. When I think of billboards, I always think of fireworks, and there's such
Phantom one.
Local, shops.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was funny, but they had the money to do it, or maybe they've just been around for so long that they just have a great deal on that billboard. But that's interesting that you're thinking of the national ones.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, that because now you brought up the fireworks, and I can only think of Phantom fireworks doing this. So, does that mean more local businesses should look back at the billboards? I'm not sure. I think it makes sense to at least explore it.
Yeah, I think it all depends on what they're trying to do.
Yep.
Because if you're a local business that's trying to grow and have an e-com presence, obviously not what you should be focusing on.
Right.
But if you're a mom and pop shop and you're just looking to get more foot traffic in there, and you don't care about your website, or you're just gonna do certain ads, and your website is gonna be like, "Hey, come in." Yeah, it might be a good way.
My thought actually is the other way around, though, Andres. I'd say even the e-com guys should be doing it.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if maybe because of short codes, so texting to get onto something real quick. You have that little piece on there, like text 87598 to get, X amount off. But the thing about it is you can't just utilize a discount on a billboard because no one's going to read that much detail on a billboard. So they might capture the number, but if you say it's going to get a percentage off, it's pointless. I'm trying to think if it's even if it's a call to action for a free gift, if that would matter. Most people probably not. But a short code will still get them to the site if it's an interesting component. So I think it really is a branding piece. You almost got to show what your niche product is on that billboard to get them to go. You got to kind of go with imagery as much as possible, and not just logo, but show what you are. So it might not be as good for let's just call it an Amazon type of store that is a general store that has everything. But if you're driving through town and you're seeing something for, I don't know, an electric toothbrush, or maybe not even an electric toothbrush, but a toothbrush that is electric that winds up to get the energy. You don't need a outlet. That would do well. I don't know where that actually came from. I think I might have saw something about this recently. But it might, stop people to say, all right, I might go check that link out just because that might be something I would want.
And now that you said that, I think actually anything that has to do with like, having a smaller footprint and, maybe selling like anything like renewable stuff.
Yeah.
I think that would actually do pretty well with billboards as well.
Right.
Because they're, you're showing that you care and you're,
Yeah, because it's not like a jewelry piece or something like that, oh man, I kind of want it, but am I actually going to go stop what I'm doing or think about it or even write it down? Probably not, right? Like, but so these are things that can replace the daily necessities and still help the environment and all of that. So yeah, like the daily necessity ones would do well. I mean, I'm actually surprised like Dollar Shave Club has not done billboards because that's another daily necessity piece that could do well. They're not too big, I guess. So maybe they will go the national route and just eyeball impressions all over the place only. But eco products probably is the best category for this particular piece. Refillable soap.
And the only reason why I thought about that is because you were talking about toothbrushes. And I just got like a bamboo toothbrush. Yeah. And I thought I was like, if I saw that on the billboard, I'd probably buy it.
Right. Yeah. That's all interesting stuff. So agencies now, are they a conduit to get to a billboard or a radio spot? Probably not as much. Radio's kind of dying. I guess you now have to go to iHeartRadio or podcast or YouTube route. But yeah, to like, the direct mail piece or the print ad or the TV spot, like agencies aren't doing much for that anymore. That's really just the actual place where you're buying that particular medium is doing things of that nature. And that's pretty much it. Like agencies now are not really having to handle your TV spot or your direct mail spot or, like the placement or the insertion of those pieces, right? Like they didn't matter as much. Like agencies don't need to do that anymore. Now, typically, like the printer would help with your medium and the agency would still provide, an ad insertion or the graphics that go along with it. But, like I would say maybe the TV medium would still require a production house to kind of come up with the actual commercial that gets sent to wherever, whatever studio or whatever TV station would be. So those are two different, very niche pieces, right? Like, I mean, the typical general agency that's more creative might do the insertion for a direct mail. Production houses are now mostly taking care of the TV spots. So that's very niche. They're not usually typically doing ads as much or anything like that. So what's happened to most of us now is everyone else, maybe even including ourselves, kind of falls into this like middle saturated point, right? Like there's too many advertising agencies or marketing agencies that are doing Facebook and Google ads and, every other piece that goes along with it. There's a couple people that are doing just branding, but it seems like branding has become synonymous with logos. Maybe less, the letterheads and everything else, but logos in general. So they're more graphic design, which is really kind of sad, in my opinion, because it's really more than that.
Yeah. I mean, you and I know that, it takes a lot more for branding than just a pretty logo. It's what people remember about you, and it's, this whole thing that just kind of got boiled down to, a logo and a slogan.
Right.
Sort of thing.
Yeah. And man, one of my wish list items would be like, I would hope that the overall encompassing element of a brand becomes more important to a smaller business that is sitting here trying to, ink out or really squeeze out a budget that, might be just pennies on the dollar because that's all they can afford. So they go into the Fivers and they go into, the 99 Designs to go do care of all of that, and then think that they can orchestrate a campaign and then have an agency just run their ads, typically for them to be the fall guys, right? Like the agency is just taking care of one piece, or the agency is actually calling out and cold calling or whatever it may be to take care of that piece for that business without even really having any element of, kind of how does this fit into this whole whole conversation or story of this particular brand. So most of those ads don't typically convert well because it's not their voice. It's not truly who they are. And, most of these agencies are, again, running that Facebook or Google ad because they just want to get it out and get that cost per lead element or whatever, without really thinking the higher element of, is this ad really telling the full story of this particular product that we were hired to take care of? And what does that mean for, where agencies are going? What do you think?
I think that, unfortunately, a lot of the agencies that are doing that and just trying to get stuff out the door are going to die out pretty quickly, especially with all the changes that, Apple's putting in place and everything like that. You can't just, do it halfway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a struggle, even for us, right? Like, because we keep getting tied into, like, is that shiny object of ads the best route for, clientele? And I think the more and more I think about it, like, it goes back to what we said a little bit earlier about, like, back in the day, Mad Men style, right? Like, everyone had a job to do. And now when agencies are saying, oh yeah, I can do that. Even the guys that say niche down, they're niching down just because that's an easier way to sell, but not niching down to cover, their best skill set. And most of these guys are, again, because it's so saturated, most people are just saying they're a jack of all trades, even if they say they're only taking care of chiropractors, or if they're only taking care of whatever, SaaS-based businesses, right? They're niching down for an industry, but probably niching down for the wrong reason, right? Like they can get a quick sale, but they're not going to keep the churn rates high. So the medium, in my opinion, I think where agencies are going are actually completely AI, right? Agencies will be completely removed. So the companies like a marketer hire and things like that, like, bringing on a particular person to take care of your copy or your graphics until it's done means you're going to get a higher production value, higher quality product than the other way around. So, like, for me, Andres, like, we brought up another client yesterday, right? And I was thinking about, like, man, what do we do to get a better quality product for them? And it's probably less divided attention. So just like our consumers or our audiences are all like, less attention span, our attention span is also less because we're doing everything for everyone. So my thought is, like, it almost goes into short-term hires of that particular piece, and the orchestrator of that may be an agency, but that hire that you might have, that short-term hire, should not be working on anything else other than the copy of, a landing page or the graphics or something.
Yeah, and I think, I'll never forget about this. I had one of our instructors. He would always just make us do one thing.
Yep.
And almost the whole class would work on that. It's like your brain can only do one thing well at a time.
Right.
Like everybody says they can multitask. Yes, that's true, but you're not going to do it as well if you were just focusing on one thing.
Yep.
And I feel like we've lost some of that,
Yeah.
especially in the agency world.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to make more money, so you're cutting people out. People are learning how to do new things, and I've always been one of those people that, I think everybody should be able to do everything.
Yep.
But I don't think everybody has to do everything.
Right.
And I feel like once you start really giving up the job, it works better for everybody. And I mean, if the other person knows how to help you out, that's great.
Yep.
But having set jobs helps, and as we were saying earlier, all our jobs are blurred in the marketing world.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's where the evolution of the agency goes, right? Like it means that an agency becomes
An orchestrator,
or maybe even a short-term headhunter, right? So the saturated amount of marketers that are out there probably does work to our advantage. If you're bringing only a copywriter in play or a graphic designer in play, and whatever client you're working with, they're going to have to understand that means a longer term project. It doesn't have to be that long. It doesn't mean a year, right? You're not hiring a full W-2 salaried person. But I mean, just even the guys that we're talking about right now this week, if we were to go in and say, all right, you know what, like if we had a copywriter follow you until they were done, they wouldn't bring up anything other than, like, first of all, they are going to, resist that because they're going to say they're too busy. And then our way to reframe that would be, well, then we're not going to get it done in time because, again, we're never getting the right content coming out and we don't have the right voice. So even if we write something, we're just going to go right back to the drawing board multiple times until we get it right. So why don't this person actually sit with you? Or, it's a little bit harder, I think it's on Zoom, but like actually be in your office just writing with you is actually an easier route. And maybe that's where we can kind of get out of this from the pandemic particular perspective, because work is changing. And even if it is where like 2 days a week you're in the office and that person's there just being your shadow and asking a question here and there as you're, knocking out a couple of emails, it's probably going to get a better, actual end product than someone that's just spending an hour to 5 hours or whatever it may be without ever really understanding who you are. That storytelling piece is gone, that particular route. So I don't know, that's my thought, at least from an agency perspective.
So one thing that, when I was running my business, I did that a few times with people. And people really didn't like it. Let me tell you. So one thing was they felt like they were too busy and that they were almost like wasting a day by doing all this. And especially if they were like in a small business.
Yep.
But I felt like if it was a bigger company and you got to walk around and do sort of that would have been better off. But if you're working with somebody in a smaller setting, and people get awkward too. If you're just sitting there kind of talking and then there's going to be long stretches of silence, people get really awkward and they don't like it as much. So I think maybe
that's where the resistance comes in.
Yeah. And it goes back to something we've talked about before, is having the right client.
Yeah.
For your type of business.
Yep.
So I don't know where that happy medium is, but
that might be another marking on the rocks conversation. I'm not sure. I mean, it might go down to your caliber of work too, right? Like if you're onboarding, this is my only thought on this particular piece, but if your onboarding is strong enough that you can build a rapport that gets these guys to trust you enough. And like, for instance, I'll storytell just for today, right? Like I was rocking around a museum while my wife and son were in a planetarium, and I got a call from the client who was just completely like, you know what, man, I trust you completely. You do whatever you want to do. I get you. Which is great because that's what I want to hear. But where is that going with YouTube with the clients, right? Like I'm like, all right, where's the disconnect then? And I think it means that again, that wearing the multiple hats is one piece, right? Like if you have a true sales or even an account relationship, you're going to be able to get that kind of ask done with that person, saying, look, man, like, look, guys, look, sir, whoever, look, ma'am, look, we're going to need a copywriter to sit with you until we're done, because that's going to get you the best result, which will get you the best conversion or whatever. So like there is going to be that component. If the small businesses can't handle that, they're going to have to kind of go that typical niche, whatever quote unquote niche agency route, who's really just trying to sell to a sales vertical. And they're probably going to have to then redo it all over again.
Right.
Because it's going to be too short term. So I think the reframing of that particular issue is something that obviously has not been done yet or not done well enough. And that might be part of the onboarding in general, or maybe bringing again an account executive that only takes care of that piece. It's actually also your sales guy. That might not be as scalable though. So I'm not sure that particular piece. It might be going right down to an onboard and explain expectations of, look, you're going to fill out this, we have a 38-page onboarding doc. The one client that we got right now that actually spent the most time with it, like, is enjoying working to the fullest. Like they will give the time that they need because of that.
Yeah.
We tried to do this onboarding doc with another client we were talking about who called me. They didn't give it the attention that they necessarily needed to back even as late as last summer. So it's now 9 months. They're still working with us, but they could have had a really amazing byproduct of the work. Like the quality of work could be a lot better if they spent the time on that onboarding to get a voice figured out right away, right? So like, I think it might go down to like onboarding in one way or another. I'm not sure.
I think that's something we should talk about some other day, just onboarding and clients in general.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's something that's overlooked because the client doesn't want to do it.
Yep.
But contrary to popular belief, a lot of times the client isn't always right. And you need to kind of let them know that unless they want to do multiple takes, they need to fill that out because we need the information as marketers.
Yeah.
We can do our job if we have enough information. But if we don't, I mean, even with a designer, a couple of times that I realized I just didn't give enough information. So I had to go back 2 or 3 times to kind of make sure we had the right product. And, over the year that I've been working with the designer, I've gotten much better at giving them all the information from the get-go.
Yeah.
And it has been much quicker.
Yeah, I mean, and they do a good job of what they do
Yeah.
in terms of fonts or colors or the graphic elements that go along with it. But if they have enough context,
Right.
it works even better. Yeah. So I mean, maybe it's just as that. I'm not sure. I think we got to sit here and think about it. I will definitely think about it as well, and see if that's really it. But like, I think marketers need to niche down, not from a sales vertical, contrary to popular belief of where I think the madman industry of like, it went from the the agencies ruling it from that back in the day, right? Like to like these gurus now kind of saying how things should be, and saying, oh, you got to do a sales vertical. It's probably not the case. You don't need a sales vertical. You need to go back to the basics of like which job title do you really want to focus on, and probably not as much on the media buying as you think it is. Most people are saying right now, media buy, media buy, media buy.
Right.
I think if you and I were to sit here and think about it, because it's saturated, we're really actually falling on our own swords. And that's the piece that's probably not going to be necessarily needed anymore. It will be taken over by robots in one form or fashion.
Yeah.
But AI can never do a good graphic or a good copy. And that's where onboarding comes in and where specialization of, focusing on one piece might be the best route.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll see. Maybe, a couple of years from now, we'll be sitting here talking about how it did go that route, and everybody has just one job now, and we'll see,
Yeah,
because AI took the other jobs in the best way possible.
right.
Yeah. So,
I mean, it could go the other route too. It could be we're just account executives, and everything
Yeah.
else is taken care of. That might not be a bad thing either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can go with that.
Yep.
All right.
Cool.
Well, I think that's it for us, guys. Cheers, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Cheers.